All right, get ready to really dive deep because
Okay.
today we are diving into the world of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
It really is. And you've given us so much great material to work with,
Yeah.
which is perfect because there's just so much to unpack when it comes to understanding, like, what makes these characters do what they do, and then how do those choices, those big and little decisions ripple throughout the Seven Kingdoms?
Well, it's a world just completely full of characters,
Oh, yeah.
each one with their own motivations. But you know what's so interesting to me about Martin's work?
What's that?
It's how he uses these characters, whether they're these like honorable knights or these total ruthless schemers. He uses them to explore this gray area of morality.
Yeah.
Like it's so rarely a simple good versus evil thing.
No, not at all.
No.
And that's what makes it so real, right? Because
Exactly.
the world just isn't black and white.
Yeah.
Like, take someone like Caitlin Stark. I mean, you see this just like unwavering devotion to her children, this fierce love that she has for them.
Yeah.
But how much of her choices do you think come from that pure love? And how much is like influenced by what's expected of her as a woman in Westeros?
That's such a good question.
It makes you wonder, is she ever truly free in the decisions that she makes? Or is it, I don't know, like these invisible chains are holding her back?
It really makes you think. And it's not just with Catelyn either.
Right.
I mean, think about Jaime Lannister. He starts off as this almost larger-than-life figure, the Kingslayer, right?
Right.
But then he loses his hand, and everything changes. It's like a turning point
Yeah.
for him and for us, because it forces us to confront, like, what does identity even mean?
Yeah.
Can he still be the man he was?
You're right.
Can he still find honor and fulfillment when this, like, core part of who he thought he was is just taken from him?
It's a powerful fall from grace, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And in a way, you almost kind of find yourself rooting for him, like, come on, redeem yourself.
Yeah.
Then you've got Jon Snow. He's stationed all the way up at the wall,
Right.
and he's grappling with his duty. He's sworn to the Night's Watch, but then he starts developing these feelings for Ygritte.
Oh, talk about a forbidden romance.
Right.
And their whole relationship just highlights that constant tension between what we want, what our hearts want,
Oh,
and what society expects of us.
totally.
He's not supposed to want a wife. He swore he wouldn't have one.
Right.
But then there's this, like, fierce, completely independent wildling woman, and he's drawn to her. It makes you wonder, can love really bloom when two people come from such different worlds? And if it can, what's the price you pay for that?
What is that cost?
Yeah.
And speaking of costs, the Red Wedding, I mean, talk about a prime example of how one seemingly small choice can have these massive, just devastating consequences.
Oh, yeah.
You've got Robb Stark trying to, like, salvage his family's honor after he breaks this marriage pact, and it just ends up costing him, well, everything.
Everything. The Red Wedding is just brutal.
It is.
And it reminds us how fickle power can be.
Yeah.
Throws the whole idea of honor and justice,
Yeah.
throws it all into question.
For sure.
And Rob, he's driven by what he truly believes is right.
Right.
But then that decision, it weakens his position.
Mm.
And it just goes to show that even with the absolute best intentions, you could still end up on a path of destruction, especially in this Game of Thrones where treachery, well, it's practically expected.
It's like this classic case of unintended consequences playing out on this huge, like, grand scale.
Yeah.
And even Daenerys, who, she sets out with this seemingly noble goal of freeing slaves across Essos,
Right.
she ends up unleashing chaos, too. I mean, there are all these unintended consequences to even her actions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Danny's heart might be in the right place, but it reveals this fundamental challenge when you're trying to change a system that's been in place for so long.
It's ingrained.
Yeah, it makes you think about how complex change really is,
Mm-hmm.
even with the best of intentions. Like, is it even possible to truly liberate people without causing some kind of disruption?
Right.
And then, who ends up bearing the brunt of that disruption?
It's messy.
It is.
There are no easy answers.
Yep.
And that feels like a lot of things in Westeros, for sure. Then you've got Theon Greyjoy betraying the Starks.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
It is.
It makes you realize how far someone might go just to feel like they belong, to feel like someone approves of them, even if it means tossing aside their morals.
Theon's story is tragic,
His.
He just wants acceptance, especially from his father. But that need to prove himself, it takes him down such a dark path.
Yeah.
It shows how dangerous it can be to look for validation from others, especially when you lose your integrity along the way.
Like, he's so focused on proving something to everyone else that he forgets who he is.
Right.
Which is a little bit of what we see, I think, with Tyrion, too, at least at the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean,
He's this character who just seems to defy expectations constantly.
oh, yeah.
I mean, he's brilliant. He's so resourceful. But he's underestimated because of how he looks.
Yeah.
He's ridiculed, even by his own family.
Tyrion's always striving for respect, maybe even just a little bit of love, which, let's be honest, he's not really getting a lot of that from his family.
Not really.
But despite his intelligence, his capabilities, people judge him for what they perceive as his shortcomings.
They only see what they want to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's sad but true, you know? Even in this world, with magic and dragons running around,
Right.
it's often the way other people see us that hurts the most.
It really is.
And when you look at the excerpts that hint at, like Westeros's past,
Yeah.
you start to realize how much history shapes what's happening right now in the story.
Yeah.
The Mad King, Robert's Rebellion, all of it, you know?
It casts a long shadow
It really does.
over everything,
Man.
especially Daenerys.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, she's trying to reclaim the Iron Throne, but it's so much bigger than just, like, simple ambition with her, don't you think?
Oh, for sure.
It's about her family's legacy.
Yeah.
It's about righting the wrongs of the past.
Exactly. Daenerys really embodies this idea that history, it's not just like a bunch of old stories.
It's alive.
It's alive. And it's shaping everything that's happening right now.
Right.
And that whole like cyclical nature of history, how betrayals and power struggles just keep repeating.
Just keeps
It
going.
makes you wonder if anyone can actually escape from the mistakes of, you know, the people who came before them.
Can you break the cycle?
Right.
Or are they all doomed to just keep making the same mistakes generation after generation after generation?
It's like they're stuck.
Totally. It's like they're on this wheel just running and running, but going nowhere.
And you see how that weight of the past plays on their decisions in the present. I mean, look at Stannis.
Right, Stannis.
He embraces R'hllor, the Lord of Light, with this like unwavering devotion.
He's all in.
All in, even when it means making some, you know, kind of ruthless choices.
It makes you think, though, about faith, right? And maybe where faith crosses over into fanaticism.
Yeah, like, is he really this devout believer? Or is religion just a way for him to justify going after the throne?
It's like, how much of it is really faith and how much is, like, a means to an end for him?
Exactly.
And it makes you think about justice, too, because he's all about justice.
He's got a very rigid sense of it, that's for sure.
But is it blinding him to what the consequences of his actions might be?
It could be. It's
Yeah.
a slippery slope for sure. And then you've got Davos,
Oh, definitely.
Stannis' most trusted advisor.
Right.
But Davos is always there to challenge Stannis.
He's the voice of reason.
He is. He's like, hey, maybe there's a more compassionate way to do this.
Right.
Davos reminds us that you can still have a conscience, even when you're surrounded by darkness.
You don't have to play dirty just because everyone else is.
Exactly. He's the embodiment of that struggle between, like, staying loyal and doing what you know is right.
Which can be really hard,
Oh, for sure.
especially when you have to stand up to the person you serve.
It takes courage to speak truth to power, that's for sure. But, you know, it's not just these highborn lords and ladies showing courage.
What about the ordinary people?
Exactly. What about the people caught in the middle of all this? Think about Samwell Tarly,
Oh, say.
stuck at the wall, constantly underestimated, always facing danger.
He's an unlikely hero.
Totally.
Yeah.
But he has this quiet strength, you know, this resilience.
Right.
He doesn't have the, like, muscles and fighting skills of the other brothers.
Right.
But he's strong in other ways. He never gives up on his friends, and he's got this thirst for knowledge.
Always reading.
Always. He's like a sponge soaking everything up.
I love that about him.
Me too. Sam reminds us that there's more than one way to be a hero.
It's not always about being the strongest or the bravest.
Right. Sometimes it's about facing your fears, using your brain, and just staying true to who you are, even when everything seems dark and hopeless.
And speaking of facing fears, no one does that quite like Arya Stark.
Oh, man. Talk about a transformation.
She goes from this sheltered, highborn girl to, like, this hardened survivor.
She has to grow up so fast.
She does. She loses her family, sees things nobody should ever have to see.
It's brutal.
It really is. But she finds a way to survive.
Right.
She learns how to fight. She becomes so independent.
She's a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
It's inspiring, but also kind of heartbreaking at the same time.
It is heartbreaking. Arya's story shows just how devastating war can be, especially for kids who are forced to grow up too fast.
And it makes you wonder, what does it take to survive something like that?
Yeah, and what do you lose along the way? Can you hold on to your humanity after you've seen so much darkness?
Or do you become a monster yourself?
Right. It's a question that follows a lot of these characters, don't you think?
It does, and it makes you realize just how blurry that line between good and evil can be.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the women of Westeros either.
Oh, yeah?
They're not just sitting on the sidelines in this Game of Thrones.
They're players in their own right.
They are. And they're often the ones challenging the rules, pushing back against this patriarchal society.
And they do it in such different ways.
They really do.
You've got Cersei, who...
Oh, she's a master manipulator, isn't she?
She is.
If you're going to play the Game of Thrones, she's like the person to learn from.
Right.
But she's got to do what she's got to do to protect herself. You know? To protect her children.
Protect her own,
Well,
because
nobody else will.
no one's going to do it for her.
Oh,
And
no.
then there's Sansa.
Oh, Sansa. Talk about someone who has to learn how to survive in, like, the worst possible environment.
Right. From, like, the sweet, slightly naive girl to...
To, like, she's got to figure out how to play the game.
She does.
And she gets good at it,
She does.
you know? She learns how to anticipate what her enemies are going to do.
It's like they both... Cersei and Sansa, I don't know.
What's up?
It's like they both figure out how to use this different type of power.
They do.
The kind that, like, people in Westeros, especially the men in Westeros, tend to overlook.
Yeah, it's like they underestimate them, which, big mistake.
Big mistake. And then there's Daenerys,
Daenerys.
who, I mean, she's this amazing combination of strength and compassion.
Yeah, she wants to break the wheel,
Yeah.
you know, not just be another cog in it.
Right. Like, she wants to rule differently.
She does. But can
She's
she?
question, isn't it?
Right. I mean, can she really change a system that's so deeply rooted, so set in its ways?
It makes you think about power, you know, like, what is power actually for?
Yeah.
Can you use it for good without it changing you, without it corrupting you somehow?
And can you dismantle something that's built on oppression
Right.
without becoming an oppressor yourself?
Exactly. And when you look at the excerpts, you see how much Daenerys struggles to hold on to her ideals, especially with people constantly challenging her, questioning her every move.
It's like she's being tested every step of the way.
Oh, constantly.
Like her will, her compassion, it's pushed to the limit.
Yeah, because compromise, it's not really an option for her, is it? It almost feels like in that world, compromise equals defeat.
Quarterly.
So is there really room for a ruler who values things like justice and compassion above all else?
That is the question.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about someone like Jaime, too.
Oh, why me? What about redemption? Can Jaime ever really escape what he did in the past?
Yeah. Can he ever be more than just the Kingslayer?
It's a tough one because, I mean, we've seen what he's capable of.
We have.
And some things you can't just take back.
You can't. But maybe that's what's so interesting about him.
What's that?
That we're even asking that question.
Yeah.
That maybe, just maybe, he could change.
Right. And you almost feel like losing his hand.
It's like a turning point for him, right?
It is.
Like it forces him to really look at the things he's done, who he is,
Right.
and maybe who he wants to be.
But is it enough?
That's what Martin leaves us with, isn't it?
Yeah.
He doesn't make it easy.
No, not at all.
Jamie's story reminds us that change is messy
Oh, yeah.
and it hurts.
Yeah.
And redemption, if it happens, it doesn't happen overnight, you know?
It's a process.
It is. But it makes you think, what would it take for us to forgive someone like that?
Right.
Could we look past what Jamie's done and see him as someone worthy of a second chance?
Or something's just unforgivable.
It's a question worth pondering, that's for sure.
It really is. And it kind of speaks to this bigger idea that keeps coming up, right? This like
Yeah.
cyclical nature of
It's like
history.
history repeating itself. We see it again and again.
We do. These characters, they're trying to break free from the mistakes of the past.
Trying to forge their own path.
But it's like they're haunted by those who came before them.
Exactly. And then you add in all the stuff about the prophecies, the magic,
Right,
the
right.
threat of winter, which, let's be honest, is
Yeah.
that just like a metaphor for like the end of everything?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, do any of these characters really have a choice in how things play out?
Or are they just playing their parts in some grand cosmic play?
Right. Like, is it destiny
Mm-hmm.
or free will? I don't know. It's a lot.
It is a lot. But, you know, even with all that, with the fate of Westeros hanging in the balance and prophecies and magic swirling around,
It always comes back to the characters, doesn't it?
it does.
Their decisions,
The choices.
their loves, their losses, their betrayal.
It's those moments that make it real, that make us feel something.
That's the power of A Song of Ice and Fire. You know, it sticks with you. You finish reading, but you don't really leave it behind.
It stays with you.
It does. And as you continue to explore this world of ice and fire,
Keep your eyes open.
pay attention to the choices these characters make,
So,
what they're willing to fight for, what they're willing to die
what they're
for.
willing to sacrifice.
Exactly. Because within those struggles, you might just find some answers to your own questions. You might discover something profound about yourself,
And about what it means to be human.
even in the face of darkness.